The Polaris Nexus was the most advanced space station ever built by the Galactic High Council. It floated in the center of a glowing star cluster, surrounded by a swirl of bright energy waves and busy docking lanes. Ships from every corner of the galaxy arrived daily, each carrying ambassadors, scientists, and warriors from powerful alien civilizations. Some ships looked like glowing crystals, some moved like liquid metal, and some stretched as wide as cities. This place was not just a symbol of power, it was where important decisions that affected the galaxy were made. There was tension in the air during this particular summit. The Council had called a rare emergency meeting, and the reason was one planet, Earth. For centuries, Earth had been a quiet, distant world. Its people were seen as slow, chaotic, and unimportant. They had only joined the galactic community a few decades ago. To many of the older species, humans were children playing with dangerous toys. But recently, something had changed. Earth had gained influence in trade, exploration, and even diplomacy. Several smaller species had chosen to align with humans rather than the old, proud empires. That alone was enough to annoy the elite civilizations. But then came the rumors. Whispers floated through the galactic communication channels. People said humans had a secret fleet. Not just any fleet, but one that had defeated pirates, rescued drifting colonies, and even scared off raiders who had never been stopped before. No one had seen this fleet in full. It had no official record in the Council's ship database. But stories kept appearing about strange-looking ships that outsmarted enemies twice their size. To the older species, it sounded like fiction or propaganda, but the Council could not ignore it any longer. That's why, today, every major civilization had sent their finest delegates to the Polaris Nexus. The Great Hall was filled with shimmering robes, glowing armor, and strange biological suits. The Andari tall beings with golden skin and bright blue eyes looked at others with silent pride. The Vacor, armored in living stone, stood motionless, always watching. The Zelthari floated silently in glass pods filled with purple mist. Each group had ruled parts of the galaxy for centuries, and they believed they had nothing to fear from a planet like Earth. Then the humans arrived. Their ship was small, old, and unimpressive, compared to the shiny, elegant crafts around it. The human vessel looked like a patched-up cargo hauler. Its paint was faded, its hull was scratched, and it made a strange humming noise that echoed through the bay. Some of the delegates laughed quietly. A few didn't even bother to look. From the ship, a group of humans stepped out. They were dressed in simple clothes, no glowing armor, no fancy robes. At the front of the group was Dr. Rhea Carson, Earth's official ambassador. She was a woman in her late 40s, calm and confident. Her hair was tied back, and she wore a grey coat with the Earth emblem stitched on one shoulder. She carried no weapons, no devices, just a small tablet in her hand. The guards at the entrance scanned the humans and frowned. One of them whispered, "Are you sure this is Earth's main delegation?" Another replied, "Maybe it's a mistake. This looks like a maintenance crew." But Dr. Carson walked forward without hesitation. She nodded politely to the guards and said, "We brought what was necessary." The council chamber was vast and filled with rows of curved seats rising high into the walls. The main floor was a large circle where speakers stood. Above, giant holograms showed the faces of those speaking. Every species had its translator. Systems, so everyone could understand each other in real time. As Dr. Carson stepped into the circle, murmurs filled the room. The Vacor representative, a heavy creature made of crystal and rock, leaned forward and said, "Earth is brave to show up with so little." The Andari speaker, a tall woman with a voice like wind, added, "Perhaps they do not understand the seriousness of this meeting." Dr. Carson smiled gently and replied, "We understand perfectly." The head of the council, a neutral AI host shaped like a floating orb of light, spoke next. "Earth's growing presence has raised questions. Some worry that your advancements have come too quickly, too quietly. Today, we will offer every member the chance to present their fleets, their technologies, and their philosophies. Voluntarily, of course. It is a gesture of trust." Most of the room understood what that really meant. It wasn't a request, it was a challenge. The powerful species wanted to put Earth in its place. They wanted the humans to show their tools. So everyone could laugh and relax again. Dr. Carson didn't hesitate. "We accept." Even Earth's allies looked surprised. One delegate from a smaller moon colony whispered, "Why would she agree to that? They'll tear them apart." But Carson's face showed no fear. Her eyes scanned the room, calmly observing the beings who thought they were superior. As the meeting ended for the day, preparations began for the fleet demonstrations. Massive hangars opened in the Polaris Nexus. Dozens of ships from across the galaxy began arriving. The Andari sent their Skyblade ships, made from a living alloy that danced through space like birds. The Vacor brought their fortress-class destroyers, each one built inside an asteroid and powered by molten cores. Other civilizations showed off teleporting cruisers, shape-shifting scouts, and bioorganic vessels that grew their own weapons. Then came the human fleet. One by one, Earth's ships emerged from hyperspace. They looked ancient, some nearly a century old. Most had straight, industrial designs, painted in dull colors like gray and navy blue. A few still had visible serial numbers from military factories long gone. There were burn marks, welded patches, and mismatched parts. The crowd laughed. "Are those even space-worthy?" Someone said. "Did they raid a junkyard?" Said another, but the humans kept arriving. There were 37 ships in total. Some were small fast corvettes. Others were larger, like the aging Dreadnought class, once the pride of Earth's planetary defense. Not a single ship had cloaking, teleportation, or advanced hull shielding from the observation decks. The other delegates watched with amusement. The Andari ambassador shook her head. "This is embarrassing." The Vacor didn't even smile. "It's an insult." A few tried to understand. One scientist from the aquatic planet, Ilos, whispered to his assistant, "Why would they bring this? Are they hiding something?" The human fleet moved into formations, slowly, carefully. Their engines didn't glow with exotic particles. Their weapons looked like old-fashioned cannons compared to the sleek energy lances of others. But their coordination was clean, tight, disciplined. Inside the human command ship, Captain Elias Monroe watched his screens. His face was scarred from past battles, and his voice was rough from years of yelling orders. He looked over the fleet data and said, "We've been underestimated. Let's not waste the opportunity." Back in the council chamber, someone finally asked Dr. Carson, "Is this your main fleet?" She nodded. "Yes, it is." A long silence followed. The Andari representative stood and said coldly, "You're either fools or liars." Dr. Carson's reply was quiet but firm. "We brought what was necessary. In the days ahead, tests would begin. Simulated battles, technology demonstrations, strategic evaluations. Everyone expected Earth to fail. They thought the humans had. made a grave mistake bringing old machines into a galaxy ruled by brilliance and power. But no one yet understood that Earth had a secret. Not in the form of hidden weapons or magic-like technology. Their secret was something far more dangerous. They had learned to survive, to adapt, to think like underdogs, and that, in the end, would change everything. The day after the opening ceremony, the Polaris Nexus was buzzing with excitement. Word had spread quickly across the station and beyond. Messages were flying between star systems, and news broadcasters from dozens of planets were reporting on. One strange fact: humans had arrived at the Grand Fleet Summit with what looked like junk ships. Everyone had expected Earth to reveal something new, something powerful. But what they saw instead were decades-old, mismatched, and outdated machines. Most believed Earth had embarrassed itself. Some thought it was a kind of joke. Others believed it was a trick. But nobody expected what was to come. All around the Nexus, alien engineers and military experts gathered in viewing decks and command rooms, watching the docking bays fill with more advanced ships from all over the galaxy. The Andari, with their elegant, blade-shaped ships, had taken one of the central bays. Their vessels shimmered in the station's light, made of polished, living metal that responded to thought. The Vacor, massive stone-armored creatures, docked their heavy fortress ships nearby. Each one looked like a floating mountain, pulsing with energy from the lava cores deep inside. The human ships, by comparison, had been pushed to one of the outer bays, a quiet corner of the station, usually reserved for cargo haulers and maintenance crews. From a distance, their fleet looked like it belonged in a museum, not in a modern war zone. Some ships had rust around the engine plates. A few were still marked with numbers from old wars. One ship, the ESS Resolute, still had visible scorch marks from a battle fought 30 years earlier. On one of the high decks overlooking the fleets, a group of young alien cadets watched the human bay and laughed. One of them pointed at a small Earth scout ship and said, "Is that even armed? My homeworld uses better ships for patrol training." A senior officer from the Andari Navy overheard them and smiled. "Don't be too harsh. Maybe they're here to learn what a real fleet looks like." Meanwhile, inside the human fleet's operations bay, things were quiet. Captain Elias Monroe walked slowly through the dim corridors of his ship, inspecting the crew. He paused near the communications hub and nodded to Lieutenant Murray Chen, who had just finished syncing the old internal systems to the Polaris Nexus network. Unlike the other fleets, which had integrated AI systems that managed everything, the humans still used a mixture of manual controls, semi-intelligent software, and clever coding tricks. Captain Monroe leaned over a console and looked at the incoming signals. He could see the broadcast messages coming from the other fleet's boats, data summaries, weapon tech displays. Everyone was showing off, but he wasn't worried. He tapped the console and said, "Let them laugh." Dr. Rhea Carson, still representing Earth in the council chamber, was facing the same reaction. Whenever she walked through the halls, she could feel the stares. The Zelthari floated past her without acknowledging her presence. The didn't hide their open disdain. One delegate even asked her, "Did Earth forget what century we're in?" She answered with the same calm voice, "We never forgot. We just remember different things." The first part of the summit was not combated, was display. Each species was invited to give a public demonstration of their technology, tactics, and ship features. In the main viewing sphere, audiences from across the galaxy tuned in to watch. The Andari began the event with a beautiful flight display, where 5 of their lightships moved in perfect synchronization. using gravity-folding drives to vanish and reappear in different parts of the simulation arena. Their ships left shimmering trails in space like glowing ribbons. The crowd cheered. Next came the VACCO, who launched an energy drill from one of their battlecruisers. It pierced through layers of thick asteroid material, then reshaped the debris into a shield around their vessel. It was raw, destructive, and impressive. Another species demonstrated a ship that could divide into 100 small drones and reassemble in seconds. Another used a stealth cloak that made their entire fleet invisible, even under thermal and magnetic scans. Then it was Earth's turn. The announcer's voice sounded almost unsure as he said, "Now presenting the Earth Systems fleet." The simulation area was cleared, and one of Earth's older ships, the ESS Pathfinder, floated slowly into position. It was boxy, grey, and unremarkable. The side panels were uneven. The ship made a slight rattling sound when it turned. From the stands, laughter began again. "What can that thing even do?" Someone said, "It looks like it belongs in a scrapyard." Another replied, "But inside the command bridge of the Pathfinder, the crew remained focused." Their systems were old, but heavily customized. The main pilot, a young woman named Sasha Idris, had grown up flying patched-up shuttles in asteroid mining fields. Her hands moved fast, sliding across physical buttons, touchscreen panels, and a worn joystick. She looked calm but alert. Captain Monroe's voice came through the radio. "Let's give them a lesson in ugly brilliance." The simulation challenge was simple: survive a surprise attack by 3 enemy drones. The other species had used shields, cloaking, or speed. The Pathfinder had none of those. But it had a trick. As the drones appeared, Sasha didn't rush. She maneuvered slowly, letting them get close. Then, at just the right moment, she released a small payloader cluster of decoy beacons. These weren't just noisemakers. They were old, Cold War tech specially coded to confuse AI targeting systems by mimicking human error patterns. The drones hesitated. In that second of confusion, Sasha spun the ship around and fired a pair of kinetic charges. Not lasers, not energy bolts, just solid metal rods launched at high speed. Both hit their targets dead on, smashing the drones into fragments. The third drone got close, but before it could fire, it suddenly shut down. The audience stared in. Silence. The human engineers, watching from their bay, smiled. The drone had picked up a fake data loop broadcast by the Pathfinder, an ancient trick known as ghost logic. It made the drone think it had already fired and won. People didn't cheer. They didn't laugh. They just stared. The human ship floated quietly, not flashy, not loud, just effective. More demonstrations followed. One Earthship demonstrated a grappling system made from high-tension carbon threads. Another used heat signature manipulation to hide its true position, not through tech, but by venting gas at a perfect rhythm. The final ship, the ESS Dagger, showed an emergency jump system built from spare parts that allowed it to shift just enough distance to dodge a simulated missile. Every trick was simple, dirty, clever. None of it made sense to the galactic military experts. These were not weapons of pride. These were tools of survival. Back in the council chamber, the mood had shifted. The powerful species no longer looked amused. They looked uncomfortable. The Vacor delegate leaned forward and asked Dr. Carson, "Why do your ships use such primitive tools?" She smiled gently. "Because they work. But your designs, they're not even shielded against modern attacks." She nodded. we know. Then how do you survive? Her eyes were calm. We survive because we don't waste time building what we can't afford. We survive because we don't assume the enemy will fight fair. We survive because we fight to win, not to impress. The next day, Earth's bay was no longer empty. Scientists from smaller colonies began arriving, asking questions. Even a few officers from the older empires came quietly, pretending to be curious. One young commander from the Droxin Alliance approached an Earth engineer and said, "Your ship looks like it's falling apart. How does it stay stable under pressure?" The engineer grinned. "It's held together with stubbornness and 30 years of good habits." The commander blinked. "Is that a joke?" "No, it's just human engineering." Suddenly, the laughter had faded. Some began whispering that Earth might have been smarter than they realized. Not because of what they built, but because of what they didn't build. Earth had not played by the galaxy's rules, while others invested in perfection, elegance, and overwhelming power. Humans had focused on practicality, repairability, and tricks that broke expectations. Every system on a human ship was designed to fail gracefully and recover. Every weapon had a backup. Every soldier was trained to improvise. These were not ships built for showing off. They were ships built for surviving the worst day on still. Completing the mission, by the end of the week, Earth's fleet had completed all tests. They didn't win by flash or power, but they succeeded in ways no one expected. The final demonstration day arrived. Most spectators believed the Council. Wold declared Earth interesting but outdated. But there was a growing tension in the air. Some feared what might happen if Earth's fleet, with all its dirt and rust, could actually win a real fight against the galaxy's finest. Dr. Carson prepared to return to the chamber. Before she left the docking bay, she turned to Captain Monroe and said, "They've stopped laughing." He looked at the old ships around him, then at the repair crew tightening a fuel valve with their bare hands. "Good," he said. "That means they're starting to think." She smiled and walked away. And in that moment, somewhere deep inside the stars, something began to shift. The galaxy had always respected beauty, power, and advanced technology. But now, for the first time in centuries, they were being forced to respect something else. The air inside the Polaris Nexus had grown heavier, not in a physical way, but in feeling. The Grand Fleet Summit was halfway through, and the atmosphere had changed. The jokes and laughter that once followed the human fleet had gone silent. Now, the other species had begun to watch Earth not as a weak and backward civilization, but as a strange and unpredictable force, something they didn't fully understand, something that made them nervous. Across the viewing halls, many commanders, scientists, and engineers from all over the galaxy sat quietly replaying the videos of Earth's ship demonstrations. Some of them watched the ESS Pathfinder's surprise takedown of enemy drones again and again, trying to find a technical explanation. Others studied the Earth fleet's strange defensive patterns, built not on strength, but on distraction, misdirection, and timing. But no one could deny that Earth's approach was different, and somehow effective. The Council had now entered the combat simulation phase. This was where ships from different civilizations would face off in simulated battles. No real weapons would be fired, but the battles would be run in high-resolution virtual environments that mirrored actual combat conditions. Every shot, every maneuver, every system failure would be tracked and judged by advanced algorithms and neutral observers. These simulations were meant to show tactical intelligence, ship capability, and battlefield leadership. Everyone had been waiting for this. phase. This was where they believed Earth would finally break. After all, it was one thing to trick drones in a small test. It was another to face advanced alien ships in open battle. The first few battles did not include Earth. Instead, the older, more powerful civilizations showed off. The Vacor engaged in a brutal match against the Zelthari. It was a heavy, slow-moving fight. The Vacor used brute strength and firepower, while the Zelthari floated and danced, using stealth and rapid movement. Explosions filled the simulation space. The crowd loved it. Then came the Andari, who performed a flawless victory using elegant warcraft that disappeared and reappeared mid-battle. Their movements were beautiful, timed like music, and controlled through advanced neural link systems. Their ships never wasted a single move. Their battle looked more like a graceful performance than a fight. Even the minor species had something to prove. The Macquarie, a bird-like civilization from a high-gravity planet, surprised everyone with compact fighters that turned mid-space at impossible angles. The Nexari creatures, made of magnetic fluids, fought with liquid ships that bent and reshaped themselves during combat. Then, finally, came Earth's turn. When the battle schedule was announced, many in the audience leaned forward with interest. Earth's first simulation would be against the Growl Imperium, a warrior race known for their fast, aggressive fighters and devastating plasma cannons. Their ships were sharp, red, and dangerous-looking. They had one of the highest victory records in the galaxy. The simulation began in a dark region of virtual space. The Growl entered in a tight spearhead formation. Their ships were faster, newer, and clearly more dangerous. The human fleet entered from the opposite side, led by the old cruiser S Valiant, supported by 2 corvettes and a repair frigate. All of them looked unimpressive. In the command ship, Captain Elias Munro sat with his usual calm face. His crew was alert, fingers on controls. The Growl commander, visible on the monitor, smirked. "Don't worry, Captain," he said. "We'll try not to damage your pride too badly." Munro didn't reply. He just gave a quiet order. "Begin distraction. Pattern Eco 7. As the Growl ships charged forward, the humans didn't fire. Instead, one of the Earth corvettes suddenly broke formation and moved to the left, then released a trail of floating metal debris. The second corvette spun right and powered down for a few seconds, pretending to be disabled. The Growl hesitated. Their sensors read inconsistent energy signals. Their targeting systems picked up false positives. Then Earth's main ship fired not at the Growl ships, but at one of their own debris clouds. The explosion triggered a chain reaction. The debris had been magnetized, and when hit, created a temporary electromagnetic storm. It blinded the Growl's tracking systems for 12 seconds. 12 seconds was all Munro needed. In that time, the Valiant turned hard, repositioning itself behind the Growl ships. It launched 3 small pods each, one carrying old-fashioned railguns that floated into position and began firing with simple, unguided projectiles. One of the Growl fighters was hit in the engine. Another tried to turn and got tangled in one. Of the floating decoys, by the time the storm cleared, the Growl commander looked confused. He barked orders, but the formation had been broken. Their perfect assault had turned into chaos. In just 5 minutes, the simulation declared Earth the winner. The chamber was silent. The Growl commander stared at the screen in disbelief. "That's not possible. We have superior ships." Captain Munro finally spoke. "Yes, but you expected a fair fight. After the match, Whispers turned to serious conversations. Council members who once mocked Earth now wanted to understand. Their thinking, how could outdated ships win against newer ones? What was Earth really hiding? Dr. Rhea Carson was invited to a private meeting with the Andari, the Vacor, and two smaller empires. They asked her politely but firmly, "What is your goal here? Why did you bring these ships, these tactics, and these strange techniques?" She smiled. "We brought them because we were told to show our best." The Andari ambassador leaned forward. "But this isn't your best. It can't be." Dr. Carson looked at them and said quietly, "You misunderstand us. These are not our best ships. They are our oldest. These are the tools we used when we had nothing. These are the ships that saved us from extinction, over and over again. They are proof that humans don't give up, that we never stop adapting." The Vacor, normally silent, spoke with a low rumble. "Then where is your real fleet?" Carson paused. Then she said, "You'll see it if we need it." The next simulation placed Earth against a mixed fleet, one ship each from 6 different species. It was designed to test flexibility and coordination against unpredictable enemies. The aliens believed that Earth would be weak against such a scenario. But Earth did something different. Instead of trying to match the enemy fleet move for move, the humans split their own group into 3 separate units. One pretended to retreat, another pretended to malfunction. The third engaged just long enough to appear like the main force. In reality, none of them were dot. In the final moments of the match, Earth activated an old stealth drone hidden among the debris field. The drone, silent and heedless, had recorded every move of the enemy fleet. When Earth struck, they didn't aim at ships, they disabled engines, targeting systems, and communications. In less than 6 minutes, the battle was over. That day, the galaxy saw something they had never seen before. Not power, not beauty, but control. Earth wasn't just fighting. Earth was playing a different game entirely. After the simulation, several smaller civilizations began approaching Earth's engineers, asking questions. "Can we study your tactics? Would you teach our pilots how to fight like yours? How did you learn this?" The answer was always the same: we learned by losing. Earth had spent centuries at war with itself, with nature, with time. Every human conflict had been a classroom. Every defeat was a lesson. They didn't rely on superior tools, they built tools that could survive failure. By the end of the 3rd day, something had changed in the Council. Earth was no longer seen as weak. They were feared, not because they could destroy the galaxy, but because they might survive anything it threw at them. Dr. Carson received a private message from one of the observers, an elder from the Andari Empire. It read simply, "Your people are not what we believed. You are something older than power. You are patient." In the human fleet bay, Captain Monroe stood with his crew. Around them, the old ships were quiet, still running on backup systems, duct tape, and custom code. Yet these ships had stood against giants. Monroe looked at his chief mechanic, a grizzled man named Harlan Beck, and said, "They finally understand, don't they?" Beck wiped oil from his hands and nodded. "Yeah. Took them long enough." Outside the bay, cameras hovered. Messages flooded Earth's embassy. Some were requests for alliance. Others were cautious questions. A few were warnings. But none were mocking. The galaxy had seen the old Earth fleet, and in its rust, in its dirt, in its scars they had seen something terrifying, not weakness, but a history of survival. And that was just the beginning. The fourth day of the Galactic Fleet Summit arrived with a strange feeling in the air. Something had shifted. The silence wasn't just because of curiosity anymore, it was mixed with caution, even fear. The name Earth was now being whispered, in corners, in private conversations, and in security briefings. Overnight, the humans had gone from being a joke to being a mystery that no one could explain. What bothered the other civilizations most wasn't that Earth had won. It was how they had won, with outdated ships, with recycled parts, with no advanced shielding systems, no energy-based weapons, no artificial intelligence, and still they had defeated fleets built on thousands of years of research and power. It didn't fit into the galaxy's sense of order. Too many, it felt like reality itself had cracked a little. Inside the Nexus Hall, the Council had called for a closed-door meeting. All representatives were to attend, even Earth. It wasn't a normal council meeting. This one felt heavier. There was no celebration, no light conversation, no exchange of gifts. The seats were filled, but the air was full of questions no one wanted to ask aloud. Ambassador Rhea Carson walked in, wearing a plain navy blue uniform. She didn't wear anything decorative or grand. She didn't need to. Eyes followed her as she moved through the room and took her seat among the lesser species, a row Earth had been placed in on the first day. No one said it out loud, but that seat no longer seemed fitting. At the head of the room stood High Arbiter Lumeras of the Vacor. His voice was deep, echoing through the marble chamber. We have gathered today not to discuss victory or defeat, but something deeper. For the first time in Council history, we have witnessed a civilization that defies our expectations in every possible way. Earth, he turned toward Carson. We wish to understand you. There was a long pause. Then she stood up slowly. Her voice was clear, calm, and without pride. Earth has always been surrounded by stronger powers. Nature, time, ourselves. We fought not to expand, not to conquer, but simply to survive. Every ship you've seen this week, those were built with that goal. They are not symbols of strength. They are proof of refusal. The Andari envoy leaned forward. But why bring these old ships? Why not show your modern fleet? Carson smiled. Because we didn't come here to intimidate you. We came here to belong. But now we are intimidated. The Growl delegates snapped. And you knew that might happen. Carson didn't deny it. We suspected, but we didn't expect. To win, we only expected to be respected. A murmur passed through the crowd. Many of the powerful species were quiet now. It was as if their centuries of certainty had been shaken. Earth had forced them to ask questions they didn't like asking. What really makes a fleet powerful? What is survival worth if it comes at the cost of pride? While debates and discussions continued inside the chambers, outside the simulations were still ongoing. Earth was scheduled to face its final combat test. This one would be different. Not a battle, a survival test. The Council had designed a special event called the Black Storm Trial. It was originally created for new civilizations to prove their fleet could survive extreme cosmic conditions. It simulated the worst possible combination: a neutron storm, gravitational chaos, radiation spikes, and surprise enemy attacks. Most civilizations trained for years before attempting it. Earth was given 12 hours to prepare. The human command crew gathered in their small briefing room aboard the ESS Pathfinder. Captain Monroe, Dr. Carson, Engineer Beck, and a few others sat around the flickering table. The simulation specs had just arrived. It was brutal, far worse than anything they had seen. Monroe leaned back. "They're testing us now," Beck spat. "Into a cloth. They want to see if we break." Rhea didn't smile, "So we don't." The preparation began at once. The Earth fleet didn't have advanced shielding, but they did have thick physical armor and old-school radiation blockers. Instead of trying to build something new, they reinforced what they had. They strapped down every loose item, ran emergency drills, and updated old software with manual override systems. They didn't plan to outsmart the storm, they planned to ride through it. The other species watched with interest. Most believed this was the test Earth would fail. It wasn't about battle anymore. It was about survival. And no one believed old junk ships could survive a level 7 neutron storm. Then the simulation began. At first, everything was quiet. The fleet floated into the virtual space slowly. The stars above looked fake, like painted light. The humans braced themselves. Then it started. The storm hit like a fist. Blinding flashes of light, heavy gravitational pulls, radiation pulses. Systems failed. Lights went out. Ship panels sparked. Many of the alien fleets watching groaned. It was obvious. Earth's ships were too old. But Earth had planned for that. They shut down their computers on purpose. They switched to manual control. When the radiation hit, their ship's heavy plating absorbed the damage. When communications failed, they used light signals and coded blinks from their windows. When navigation stopped working, the pilots flew. By instinct, inside the storm, chaos ruled. But Earth did something strange. They didn't fight the storm. They followed its rhythm. Like sailors in an ocean, they turned when the gravity pulled. They ducked when the radiation peaked. Their ships creaked and groaned, but they didn't break. Then came the second part of the trial. The simulation introduced an enemy force drone attackers equipped with quantum missiles. Most ships would try to fight back. Earth DIDN, single quotes, 2 instead. They used the storm itself. One corvette drifted directly into a gravity vortex and pulled 4 drones with it. Another hid behind an asteroid field charged with radiation, forcing the enemy to destroy themselves when they followed. One by one, the drones were taken out by the environment, not by human weapons. It was brilliant. At the end of the hour-long trial, all 5 Earth ships were still standing, damaged, cracked, burned, but alive. The chamber erupted. Even the most skeptical observers were stunned. The Andari ambassador stood up in awe. "You used chaos as a weapon. That is not science, that is art." The Growl, even in defeat, nodded with quiet respect. "We underestimated them." A message from the High Arbiter was sent immediately. Earth had passed every test. Later that night, the Earth crew stood together in the hangar bay. The old ships sat around them like tired veterans. Monroe put his hand on the hull of the ESS Pathfinder. "She did good," Beck smiled. "They all did." One of the younger officers asked, "Do you think they'll invite us into the Inner Fleet Alliance now?" Dr. Carson looked up at the stars. "Maybe, maybe not. But that's not the point anymore. What is? That they know we're not weak, that we don't need new ships to be strong. That survival isn't about looking powerful, it's about refusing to die." At the same time, in the Council Tower, many species held emergency meetings. The question wasn't just about Earth anymore, it was about everything the galaxy had believed for centuries. Had they grown too comfortable? Had they mistaken shine for strength? Some proposed that Earth be invited to share their training techniques. Others argued that Earth must be watched closely, they were too unpredictable. But everyone agreed on one thing: The humans had changed the rules. Back in the human quarters, Monroe received a private message from a Zelthari commander. It said, "Your ships are old. Your systems are weak, but your people are strong. You will never be ignored again." The next morning, as the final ceremony approached, Earth stood not at the back of the hall, but at its center. The path they had walked, mocked, doubted, underestimated had. Lead here, not through war, not through superiority, but through resilience. Captain Monroe looked around at his team. They weren't the best pilots. They didn't have advanced implants or quantum minds. They were tired, scarred, and very human. And that was enough. No one knew what the future held, whether Earth would be welcomed or feared, whether they would join the Council's elite fleets or remain outsiders. But one truth had been carved into the memory of the galaxy. Humanity, with its broken ships and stubborn hearts, had survived the storm, and storms remembered those who did. The final day of the Galactic Fleet Summit arrived like the calm after a storm. There was no simulation planned, no combat trial, no dramatic test. It was meant to be a ceremony, a peaceful ending to a week filled with fire and fury. Delegates and commanders from hundreds of species wore their most beautiful robes, armor, or robes of light. They came with medals and gifts, prepared to honor the greatest warriors of the galaxy. But something felt different. Not everyone could say it aloud, but everyone knew it in their hearts. This summit would be remembered not for the winners, but for the ones who were once expected to lose. The story of Earth had spread across every corridor, through every digital message board, even whispered in underground military channels. The species that had been mocked, ignored, and labeled as too primitive had changed everything. And today, they would stand on the same stage as the galaxy's greatest powers. Captain Monroe stood quietly in his quarters, staring out at the stars through the round window of the ESS Pathfinder. His ship had gone through hell and come out bruised, but breathing. Every panel had a burn mark. Every pipe had been rattled, but it had survived, just like Earth always had. He turned as the door slid open. Dr. Rhea Carson stepped in, holding a silver box. "Official uniform," she said, handing it over. "We have to look proper for the final ceremony." Monroe chuckled. "They didn't seem to care about uniforms when we were flying through a neutron storm. They care now." He opened the box slowly. Inside was a dark blue uniform with silver threads stitched along the shoulders, simple, clean, nothing flashy. But it had weight. It meant something now. Elsewhere in the human section, crew members polished their boots, brushed off carbon stains from their jackets, and fixed their hair in front of dusty mirrors. No one had expected to reach this point, but now that they had, they wanted to represent Earth with quiet dignity. As the ceremony hour approached, shuttles began flying across the sky toward the Grand Assembly Hall. It was shaped like a star, its self-tall towers spiraling from a central dome with glowing bridges connecting its parts. Light from 3 different suns poured down on the structure, creating golden reflections on its smooth metal skin. Inside the hall, seats were arranged in perfect circles, each circle representing a tier of civilizations. At the center were the inner circle members, the ancient powers that ruled the galaxies, politics, and defense strategies. Around them sat the middle, ring those who were strong but not dominant. And at the far outer ring sat the emerging worlds, where Earth had been placed on the first day. But today, Earth's nameplate was not there. Instead, The holographic display above the floor showed a new placement. The center it didn't make sense. This wasn't how the council worked. You couldn't just move up in rank without thousands of years of history, without agreements, alliances, or bloodlines. And yet, there it was. As the human team entered the hall, silence swept the room. All eyes turned toward them, some full of curiosity, some full of respect, a few still full of confusion, but none with laughter. Captain Monroe led the group. Rhea walked beside him. Engineer Beck followed, his jacket still stained with engine oil. Behind them came the rest of the small Earth delegation, their boots echoing softly on the smooth floor. They took their place at the center table, and for the first time in history, Earth had a voice in the middle of the galaxy. High Arbiter Lumeras rose from his golden platform. His voice echoed across the chamber. This summit began with expectations, with pride, with structure, but it ends with a lesson that strength cannot always be seen, that old ships can still carry new legends, that survival is not a matter of tools but of spirit. He turned to the human table. Earth, step forward. Captain Monroe stood. So did Dr. Carson. They walked to the center platform, where a beam of soft white light circled them. The High Arbiter raised a ceremonial staff carved from crystal mined in the void of dead stars. Do you accept recognition as a founding-level civilization of worth? There was a moment of stillness. Carson and Monroe glanced at each other. Then Monroe nodded. We accept, not as conquerors, but as survivors. The Arbiter lowered his staff. Then Earth shall be remembered. In stone, in signal, in story. The room, which had been so silent before, slowly erupted in something. Unexpected applause. Real applause, not from everyone, but from enough. The Undari clapped with glowing hands. The Vacor gave slow nods. Even the Growl tapped their claws in approval. It wasn't just about Earth anymore. It was about what Earth represented. Reminder that the galaxy had grown arrogant, that power wasn't only about lasers and speed and artificial minds, that sometimes the strongest thing a ship can carry is the will of the people inside it. Later that night, a grand celebration was held, not for battle, but for peace. The courtyard outside the assembly hall was lit with floating lights and surrounded by holographic trees from different planets. Music filled the air, each melody coming from a different world. Foods from across the galaxy were served, some bubbling, some glowing, some still moving. The humans didn't have much to offer. Their ships had no famous chefs, no alien spices. But Beck had brought something. A small container of roasted peanuts and chocolate bars. When a Zelthari general asked to try one, Beck handed him a bar. The tall insectoid alien sniffed it, tasted it, then smiled with his dozens of sharp teeth. Delightful crunch, he said. Within minutes, Beck had a line of curious aliens waiting for Earth's primitive snacks. It was silly, it was small, but it was real. In a galaxy full of perfection, humans brought imperfection, and it was welcome. In a quiet corner of the courtyard, Dr. Carson sat beneath a silver-leafed tree, speaking with an elder from the Malari species. They didn't talk about weapons or politics. They talked about poetry, about how Earth's moon had inspired stories for centuries. The Malari elder shared a song written during their own species' darkest time, and Carson shared a human poem written during a world war. And together, they found a strange comfort in knowing that pain and beauty often grew side by side. Back aboard the ESS Pathfinder, the crew slowly returned from the celebration. They were tired, but they were smiling. The ship, though old, felt like home again. Monroe stood on the bridge alone for a while, running his hand over the edges of the navigation panel. A panel that had nearly short-circuited during the storm trial. A panel that had guided them anyway. Still ticking, he whispered. Then his communicator buzzed. A message from Earth Command. Short, simple. We watched everything. The world is proud. Come home. He stared at the message for a long time. The next day, the Earth fleet departed the summit. They didn't leave with riches. They didn't bring back alien tech or rare metals. But they brought back something more powerful, recognition. As their ships jumped into warp space, messages flooded into their communication channels. Some were requests for alliances. Some were questions about tactics. Some were simple congratulations. And a few were ... warnings. Because not everyone was happy about Earth's rise. In the shadows of distant worlds, in secret halls and war rooms, powerful forces began to speak. Some believed Earth had cheated. Others feared they might become a threat. Some just couldn't accept that everything they knew had been challenged. But Earth didn't care, because Earth had done what no one expected. They had walked into the heart of the galaxy with broken wings and had flown anyway. And now, somewhere far beyond stars and systems, old ships drifted through the void, carrying not just weapons or armor, but a new name, a name the galaxy would never forget. Humanity. Humanity, the species that turned rust into victory and silence into a story.